Welcome to the Artist Advisory Hotline, the podcast for artists who want valuable guidance and honest answers on how to grow their careers and develop their new project from leading art world experts and artists. Here's your host and founder of the Artist Advisory, Marina Press Granger. Tune in as she gets you the answers you deserve.
Hello, artists. I'm your host, Marina Granger. It has been like a whole month since we hung out together. And that's cool because I feel like September was one of the most busy months of the year. I don't know if it was like that for you, but it certainly was like that for me. It's such a great time ushering out August. It was so magical. I spent like a whole week in the Hamptons and I went to the Hamptons Classic, which is an incredible horse show. I never thought I would care about a horse show, but I was invited, and it was like so cool to see how powerful these incredible animals are. And just, it was so great. And also, they like really braid their tails. It's like so cool. Anyway, so I did that, and then I went over and had an incredible time back in New York during Art Week. We had we had 5 art fairs in New York City right after Labor Day. And then, of course, it was like back to school for the art world. So there were like a million openings, and it was one of the busiest weeks ever. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that today. And we're going to have a wonderful interview that I think was like so fun to do. I interviewed the artist Grace W. Nguchu, who is an artist originally from Kenya. She moved to the US in 1998 to pursue her MBA and went to university in Hawaii, which is awesome. And now is an incredible artist who is also one of the artists in Radiant Voices, which is an online group exhibition curated by myself, Katerina Popova from Create Magazine, Alicia Puig, Lisa Zhurakovskaya from Curator on the Go, and all of this for VAC Visionary Arts Collective. So it's been so cool to talk to Grace, and I can't wait for you to meet her. But before we do, I want to give you like a little rundown of what happened during Art Week in New York City. So I'm sure that many of you listening, if you were in New York, were maybe walking the fairs or going to the fairs, but there were 5 major fairs. There was the Armory Show, Volta, Independent, 20th Century, Art on Paper, and Spring Break. Now, why would these fairs be important for you? And why would you even want to go to art fairs as an artist if maybe you're not even showing at them yet and you're like, I don't want to go. I know that when I was working in galleries, whenever we would do a fair and we'd be like, oh gosh, next year we want to do the bigger one, and next year the bigger one, the bigger one. And of course, we would have to go to these fairs to see what the vibe was like and what it was like to actually like exhibit at the bigger fairs. That was like the first step to actually understanding how all of this works. And what I want to invite you to do is that next time you get a chance to go to an art fair, really look to see what the galleries are showing. What is the type of artwork they're showing? And ask about some of the artwork. Walk into a booth and pretend like you're going to buy it, because you get to also hear how people are going to sell the work to you. What are they pushing? Like, how do they present the work? And a lot of the time, you're going to hear something akin to an elevator pitch, which is something I talk about all the time, right? And the elevator pitch is essentially what the artist is interested in slash why they're doing it, how their perspective informs their work, and then what they do. So you're going to hear a lot of that, but here's the thing. When you go to these fairs, a lot of the time you might be thinking, well, I'm just an emerging artist. I'm not going to be able to show at this major art fair. But a lot of the major art fairs, like the Armory or Art Basel, Miami Beach, they have sections for emerging galleries and or emerging artists. It depends on the year of the fair and what the sections are, but they do have this. And a lot of the time, you are your biggest barrier to entry, like the belief that you're like, oh, I have to do all of these things before they can even consider me, right? So, getting rid of that is kind of the most important thing. And one way to do that is there are so many ways to do that. But the first thing I want to tell you is think about the universal law of oneness. The universal law of oneness is essentially something that tells us that if you can see that it can happen, it can happen to someone, it can happen to you, right? So, going to these fairs firsthand, seeing that they exist and what happens there is energetically the very first step to take to even showing at these fairs. And that is something that I do with artists. I actually am doing for the third year in a row a retreat in Miami. So, for 2 days, I'm going to be taking a small group of artists around the art fairs in Miami that are happening in December. They happen every single year in December. And over 60,000 art lovers of all sorts come to Miami specifically for these art fairs. And what's really beautiful is that you get to strategically analyze what's at the fairs, how to actually look at the pricing, how to find the niche in which you belong, that pocket of the art world you belong to. And also, you get to meet gallerists, you get to have also a really spiritual experience. So, I want to tell you about the retreat real quick because I think it'll give you an idea of how to go through the fairs. If you are if you come on the retreat or if you go to art fairs anywhere else. So what I do is we will obviously meet up for morning caffeine, whatever way you take it. And then we're going to hit one of the art fairs. At the art fairs, I will ask you to look for formal characteristics, non formal characteristics that align with yours so you can find a gallery that makes sense for you, and many different galleries, probably. Now, the reasoning behind this, and this is something that I teach in my course, how to know which galleries are right for you. And you're only really going to hear it here because I have not heard this from anyone else. The thing is, galleries have a very set list of collectors and they know what those collectors want. And usually those things are either formal characteristics or non formal. For example, there might be a gallery that shows work that is usually large scale, representational, and of a certain palette. And when I say that, I really underline usually because let's say 70% of the artwork that they show aligns with those formal characteristics. And of course, there's going to be 30% that doesn't, right? But the idea there is that they have a set of collectors that go to them for those characteristics, right? And that's kind of like think about the clothing stores where you shop. You might shop at several different stores and they all sell, women's clothing and jeans, but they all have different kind of characteristics, right? And so galleries are similar. And so going to an art fair and firsthand looking at this really helps you identify where you fit in. So that is so, so, so important. So what we do is, of course, yeah, we meet for our morning beverage, we go to an art fair, we then go to have lunch with a curator, and then we're going to go to another art fair. And finally, we're going to have a really nice fancy dinner. So that's the first day. The second day is a little bit lighter on the art fairs. We are going to meet up for our fancy morning beverage where I'm like, I need my matcha. Everyone needs their coffee, whatever it is. And then we're going to go to one of the art fairs, probably the main fair. I like to save it for the last day. or the second day. So go to the main fair, and then we have lunch with another gallerist. And then we're going to have a workshop, very mystical intention setting workshop. And then we're going to go on to experience a sound bath, which is so incredible, like a sound bath meditation. And after that, we are going to have a celebratory toast. So it is such a wonderful experience. And I highly recommend it to you if you are curious about what it's like to be at the fairs, where you fit in, and how you can show at one of the major fairs. I can tell you that one of the artists that I went to Miami with for the first year, she had been showing for, I would say, like 4 decades, but had never shown at these fairs, never. And she was like, "Well, how do I do this?" So she joined me. And the next year, she had 3 paintings in a major fair, big art fair with a really reputable gallery. So it was really incredible to see. I'm so freaking proud of her. And all it was, she just needed that clarity of knowing that energetically it's possible and how to kind of pragmatically make it happen. So that's what you get from this experience. I'm going to link it in the show notes along with my course on how to know which galleries are right for you. So that's that. In New York, what we had was the Armory Show, which has more of a kind of top tier gallery vibe where the artworks are kind of really intensely um, priced in the maybe 4, 5, and 6 figures. And there was also a section for emerging galleries there. Then, and I went to that fair and it was so much fun. I walked it with Katerina Popova from Create Magazine, and it was just so fun. And of course, with Tanya, who's an incredible artist. And we ran into so many incredible people. It was just like so great. And then there's Volta, which is traditionally it was owned by the same people who own the Armory, but they sold it like a few years back, and so it's a little bit different. It's a lot smaller of an art fair, and they get to show the booths that are curated are mostly kind of group booths. But in the beginning, when Volta was the sister fair to the Armory, what happened was they used to have solo booths only. So now that the solo booths are kind of gone, although the gallery, the Forma, where I curated their summer group exhibition, brought in a solo booth to Volta, and it was stunning. It was the artist Karen Wiskiewicz. So that was really great. They also had a Ukrainian pavilion, and that was really nice. There's also Spring Break Art Show, which I love. It's like my favorite fair to go to. And it's my favorite fair to go to because a lot of the artists that are showing there are very new or maybe have I feel like there's a real sense of discovery when you're walking through. What's special about Spring Break is you don't need a gallery to show at that fair, but you do need a curator. And so it's very well curated. It's very good and it's just so fresh. So I went to see this fair and inevitably I ran into some of the artists that I work with and at the fair, a big shout out to Lithoriel Badenhausen, who had 2 incredible articles, one in ArtNet and one in Hyperallergic, that mentioned her booth at Spring Break. And it was just an incredible booth. So shout out to her and her curator, Kat Riles. So that was incredible. Kat was also one of the featured artists in the fair and showing off some incredible sculptures that she made during her residency at the Museum of Arts and Design. So that was lovely. There was also work by Caitlin McCormick. And let's see, there's One artist that I work with was a curator at Spring Break. It was Christina Lucia Giuffrida. And gosh, I hope I pronounced your name properly on air. But anyway, I'm so, so proud of you. And then at Art on Paper, which I did not get to go to, unfortunately, I want to give a shout out to Karina Guerrero, who's in my universe and was showing there as well. But it was so, so incredible. Oh, and it was great to see that Emily McElworth, who has an incredible podcast called The Art Career, and I was on it. It was so fun. She curated a beautiful booth that was right at the entrance to Spring Break. So that was wonderful to see as well. So Spring Break just gave me all the warm and fuzzies, and I could have stayed there all day. So that was really great. And of course, the fifth fair in town was Independent, which was focusing on 20th century work. And it was at Casa Cipriani, which is kind of like a private members club, but you could obviously go in if you had a ticket to the fair. So that was fun. But it was just such a whirlwind, and I've had so much fun, just kind of like really being in the art world, like really, it was the art world went back to school. I also went to an opening reception for Jeff Way, who still, I believe it's on view for another week or two, had a solo exhibition open up at Storage Archive. Storage Archive, of course, is a space that is run by Onyetika Chuk, who was just on this podcast. And Jeff Way is one of my favorite artists that I've worked with. So that was really exciting. Also, a big shout out to Alana Farrell, who just had a solo show open up at Alexander Gray Associates in Germantown. I was actually upstate this weekend and got to go to the opening. It was so cool. I got to meet Hillary Harkness. Amazing. And we talked all about the Harkness name, which my husband's name is Harkness. And anyway, I digress. But anyway, I want to give a big shout out to both Jeff Way and Alana Farrell for their stunning solo exhibitions. This is so incredible. And there's so many more. Oh, I saw an incredible solo show by Joanne Steinhardt at the El Barrio Art Space at PS 109. And it was so well thought out and so great. So shout out to you, Joanne. And I feel like, like, am I forgetting something? Maybe, but if I am, I'm sorry. I'm just going here with no notes. But anyway, without further ado, I do want to give you this incredible interview with the artist, Grace W. Nguchu, who is so cool. She, like I said, is one of the artists in the group show Radiant Voices that is co-curated by myself. And we're going to link that show in the notes for you, including links to Grace's website and Instagram. So without further ado, here we go. Hello, Grace. Thank you so much for coming on to the Artist Advisory Hotline. It's so delightful to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me to this podcast. I'm very excited. So it is such a wonderful opportunity to get a chance to talk to you. I've kind of followed you a little bit, online. I've taken a few seminars with you, so very excited to be with you today.
Thank you. And yes, I've been following you too. I mean, it's no secret. I love the color pink. And it seems like you're into it too.
Yes, I could see that on your Instagram pages that, well, we kind of kindred sisters here with the pink color. So yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, Grace, I've got to ask you to tell us a little bit about what inspired you to essentially become an artist. I know it might be laborsome to go into this, like, oh, when did you first decide to become an artist? How did it happen? But you are so incredible with the work that you make. And what's really special, I think, is that you have such a strong story that correlates to your work. And you are so consistent in your work. I just absolutely love everything. It's all very clearly presented and so interesting to look at. I would love to hear from you where it all began.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate it. So I want to say that my art journey actually began, I think I want to say in primary school, what they call here elementary school, that is in Kenya, East Africa. So I used to love reading these comics, the Archie comics. Okay, yes, I'm exposing my age, but but
Hey,
I just like,
I remember them too.
okay,
So, and
okay,
it's actually like really cool to be older now, I think. So
right,
I'm just gonna go with that. But yeah,
okay.
Archie comics. Okay.
Yeah, so I kind of like the way, the cartoon characters, were depicted with Archie, Veronica, Betty. So I was like, okay, let me see if I can draw them. And, I started drawing, just like copying from, what I was seeing and drawing. And I guess it's there that it dawned on me that I could draw, because I kind of liked the way I was able to get a sort of almost the
Like a
same reference picture with the artwork. So yeah, and people liked my drawings, my friends. So yeah, that's why I want to say I just started with that, and from there I moved on to trying to draw landscapes on, the I don't know what it's called, but it's on the concrete, but I was using charcoal. So of course that would
Oh,
be washed away, but I I kind of like the way it was so much easier for me to draw with charcoal on the concrete. So
so
yeah,
like murals on walls?
not on walls, but it was on the ground. You know,
Wow. Oh my
yeah.
gosh,
So
so
I used to
cool.
do that. Yeah. So yes. So that's how I was like, okay, I think art is my thing, and when I moved on to high school, that's when I took it up as a subject. And I, did well in the subject. And then when I, unfortunately, when I told my parents that I wanted to pursue graphic design as my career, they
You
were
you
like,
didn't even say you weren't even like, I want to be a fine artist. You were going on the practical side there. You were like
yes, on the
graphic
practical side.
design, mom and dad.
Exactly. And they were like, what is that? And yeah, but they were not too keen about it. And they were like, I think you would do better if you did a business degree. So I I think that's where my art journey kind of stopped, But I did during the holidays, I would paint for retail stores, like during the Christmas season. They would have paintings of Christmas trees on the glass windows. So I would do those paintings as a way to earn just some money on the side. But in terms of like formally pursuing art as a journey, it ended in high school. So yes.
And so when did you start back up again?
So I started back again, I think in 2018, and that is when I'd already, come to the US. So again, it was just a case of like I would, it was something that I pursued sort of on the side, like little paintings here and there, um, you know, like collages with mixed media, things like that. But it was nothing ever serious. The Now when I went like became an art professional, or rather made it my career, was in 2022. So yes.
And so, okay, so I love this trajectory where you were like really inspired by Archie comics. You were like, hey, I can copy this. Maybe I'm good at it. And you got positive reinforcement from your teachers. And then you said, hey, mom and dad, what if I do graphic design? They were like, well, what about business? And which ironically, Grace, was kind of my story, except with art history. I was
Okay.
so into remembering the history of everything, and I was so curious. But when I told my grandparents who were raising me, I was like, well, I want to go study art history. And they were like, well, how about business? So I so I went to a school that was famous for business, but I
Okay.
switched my major to art history.
Nice.
So that's how I did it. But,
Okay.
I feel like business as a background is so incredibly important for an artist. And this kind of goes to say that with any business, right? Like you are, and the world of business is so huge, right? So I don't know exactly what you specialized in. Did you have a specialty or?
Yes. So I did business administration in Kenya. I finished the degree, and then I actually came to Hawaii. That's how I came to the US now to pursue a master's in business administration. And that time now is when I selected marketing as the specialization.
Okay,
So
Grace, I can tell. I can tell. And, one of the most critical things about marketing and getting your message out there is understanding that we are natural storytellers, right? So we
right,
remember stories and they
right.
kind of keep going. And so that's where I always when I talk to artists, I'm sure you guys have heard this on the podcast before. I'm always like, hey, there's this elevator pitch, right? That I ask you to kind of convey, which is what you're interested or why you do what you do, how your perspective informs your work, and then what it is that you do. And Grace, you are your whole story, all your branding is so, so clear. So can you tell us a little bit about your work and how your perspective informs your work?
Yes, definitely. I'd love to share that. So my work is based mainly on landscapes. Um, and most this landscape, it's kind of inspired by the Kenyan landscape because that's where actually I grew up. I was born there and I grew up. So I'm highly inspired by the diverse, landscape that is located in Kenya, from the deserts in the north all the way to the coastal, the coastline in the southwest area. So it's like you get everything, um, you know, from just looking at it. So I wanted to depict the beauty of, my country. So it started off like sort of like I'm marketing it to the people, like, hey, this is a place
Yes.
to visit. Yeah, come and check out it's beautiful scenery. And then also in a way, I based on, because I do travel to Kenya every year, and I do try to visit or revisit my old, childhood places, and I see things have changed. So also in my work, it's like also to kind of send out a message there that we really need to try to, conserve our environment because it is disappearing very fast. In 15, 20 years, we might not find the things that were there that were there anymore. So it's kind of there's an inner message in my work too that I'm trying to tell the audience.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so fitting that also we're recording this during the climate week here in New York City, which is
Wonderful.
interesting.
Yeah.
But I wonder if this message was something that you initially were called to spread, or maybe because the one thought I had was, well, in Hawaii, it's such a big part of their culture to preserve the environment. And I wonder, was there a connection there for you when you came to Hawaii?
Yes, there was definitely. Because when I arrived in Hawaii, I was just struck by the majestic mountains that I saw there, the flower, the fauna, everything was just beautiful, like on a postcard. So I think that has also really influenced me, in painting, I guess, the landscapes. Yes, I'm inspired by Kenyan landscapes, but on the other hand, I lived in such a beautiful state, so there's an element of that I do bring also in my paintings, because I'm like, I think, with telling the audience that, this beauty needs to be preserved, first of all, you need to appreciate it and then preserve it. I feel like we can do a whole lot more, um, in conserving this world.
We certainly can. Absolutely. And when it comes to your palette that you choose, I know we started out with pink. I'm like, oh my God, it's so cool.
Yeah,
It draws us in.
yeah.
Where, what inspired you to start with or to work with this palette?
I think it was for me the hot pink, and I found this hot pink color in Michael's actually. So I think it's just the way it's so vibrant, and I was like, this is it. This is what I'm trying to show people, in my artwork. Like when you look out there, the the beauty, the magnificence of nature is so striking. I think this is the color that can actually depict what I'm trying to tell the audience. So that's why I started using the hot pink paint. I did originally start off with reds, but I felt like I do love reds, but I was like, I think this hot pink is much better at conveying what I'm trying to, let people know.
Yeah. I feel like there's something, and I wonder if this is something that you think about, that color has this vibration, this frequency to reach us on such a deep level. It
Yeah,
could be healing, it could be emotional, and it's something that we might not even consciously recognize, but subconsciously we are into it. And I sometimes think about these. I feel like sometimes you walk into like a witchy store and I'm like, oh, which witchy stores am I going to? But they have these giant color field posters to
right.
recalibrate one of your chakras or something like that.
Yeah.
So, what is that relationship for you with color? Or, you know, or do you have one? Or am I imposing it on you?
No, I mean, I think um, for me, well, the relationship with color that I have is that I feel like it expresses the mood or the the moods that you're trying to convey. So if you're for me, I want to possibly portray like uplifting moods, intensity. So I tend to choose things that are really, and if you can see my paintings, like I really do have high contrast, in the painting. So I think that is that's what I feel, regarding color, something that would be able to convey those moods for the story that you're trying to tell to the audience.
Mm, I love that. Now, okay, speaking of talking to your audience, you are conveying the vastness, the beauty, the diversity of the Kenyan landscape. And for anyone listening right now, if they are I know I definitely am really interested in visiting Kenya. If someone is interested in visiting, where do you suggest? What are like the places you suggest they absolutely have to see when it comes to the nature that it offers?
Oh yeah, oh definitely.
Mhm.
So I would definitely recommend the people people would come to Kenya to view the Rift Valley, because that's where you would have the Grand Mountains with craters. We have two mountains actually that are, one is what we call dormant, the other one is actually dead, but the crater, were previous volcanic mountains. So there are so many caves that you can find in that area. There's the huge forests that you can also find in the Rift Valley, and animals, the wildlife like elephants, zebras, and things like that. So, and the lakes are interesting in that some of them you'll find like the freshwater lakes that usually contain flamingos, pelicans. Then on the other hand, we have like sort of like hot springs lakes, like one called Lake Bogoria. So there's so much to see. And then on the other side, on the northern part, we have the desert. There's beauty also in the desert, So we do have the coastline. That is the southwest southeast, where you have the, white sanded beaches. The Indian Ocean is not as, what can I say? I've swum in the Indian Ocean and I've swum in the Pacific. It was a struggle to swim in the Pacific Ocean because I found the waves so much stronger. But in the Indian Ocean, the waves are not that strong. So you can kind of, relax and, just enjoy the scenery there. So yeah, I just think there's so much to see, and we'd encourage people to visit.
Just this weekend. So this is so incredible. And it's also wild to hear that, again, like reiterating this idea that there are so many different types of landscapes. There's the desert, there's the mountains and the volcanoes in the Great Rift Valley, there's the lakes, and I guess the variety in animals is really cool too. Do the
Right.
animals ever show up in your work?
No. So
Oh.
let me say, actually, that I don't really depict animals. I'm thinking of doing that one day, but not at this time. Though I feel compelled that I need to include them because they're part of the Kenyan landscape, So I guess it's something I've thought about, we'll see.
I'm just saying, Grace, I feel like there has to be a collaboration between you and Giraffe Manor in Nairobi.
Right.
I feel like they have
Seriously.
to sponsor you to go and, paint the beauty from over there.
Right.
I
Yes.
was gonna say just this weekend I was actually at a wedding and I was hanging out with one of the guests who travels all over the place, and she went on and on and on how beautiful Kenya was. And I asked her, I was like, have you ever been to Giraffe Manor, which is so famous on the internet?
Oh yes, it is. It is. I mean, most of the time they show the giraffes coming to eat from your, palm of your hand, but it is a very beautiful place. And I think this something about giraffes. One of the guides stated that they don't talk. Make they don't make sounds. They're very silent creatures. And I was kind of surprised about that because every animal makes a sound, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, giraffes don't do that. So, which was interesting to know. So,
That is really interesting.
right, yeah.
Wow. But yeah, I was like, I really want to go there. That's been on my list, but to hear you talk about the vastness of the landscape itself, and now I'm like, oh, well, that's so limiting to just go to this one little spot, right? Now, speaking of climate, how is climate change starting to show in Kenya, in the landscape of Kenya? I feel like we kind of get it here a little bit. Like we're like, oh yeah, it's too hot, it's too cold. But what is it
Right.
doing to such a diverse kind of ecological system?
Yes. So, what I've noticed is that in Kenya we kind of like have just maybe, I want to say at most it is 3 seasons, but not really. I want to say mainly 2 seasons. So there's the rainy season and there's the dry season. Now, the rainy season is between March to May, and then there's a cold season, June, July, and then from there, October to December is again the rainy season, but that's called the short rain season. So we've noticed like the colder season, which was usually June and July, is starting from June, but lasting all the way to August, when that would be the hot season, really. Okay. When it rains, it floods now, like seriously. So it's affecting the vegetation. We've also noticed like in some areas, of course, because some places in Kenya are very high, like I think 6,000. I want to say 6,000 meters high or something like that. I'll need to check on that. But where those are the highlands where they usually grow tea, and there's also vegetation that is adapted to that. There's animals that are adapted to that. And what has happened is that it's getting a little bit warmer, so the vegetation is affecting the way the tea is growing, and also the vegetation there, and also having an impact on the birds that are there. They've gone down over a certain period of time. From 1970, I think, to now, we've lost like about a few millions of species of birds, So that is,
Wow.
yes. So that is the effect, which is sad. So those are the things that, I'm trying to kind of like, I'm sort of being an activist about the environment, and trying to wake people up to
Yeah.
what our what is it called? What's our impact as human beings in the environment?
Yeah.
Also want to add, you also see my work, it's just not landscape. I've included human beings. So most of the time it's on a diminutive scale, because I want to show how small we are compared to, the natural realm, and then other aspects, I'm trying to make my human being now bigger, because I want to start showing like how much we are impacting this environment, so.
Yeah. Wow. And, this is kind of a broad question, but what can we do right now? And there are so many things that I can think of, because I don't know. I'm like, I kind of try to do them, but what can we do to lessen the impact of climate change as an individual? I know it's a
So
big question.
yes, it is. It is actually a big question, yes. But I think it's just like what everybody. I'm sure not everybody, but like most people are trying to do. I try to believe in the good of what people are trying to say when I talk to them, friends, colleagues, work colleagues and things like that. Recycling. Somewhere in Kenya, we're trying to also, raise or put, what is it called? Put on blast the activities that we are doing in Kenya, especially there are plans to start a road in the what we call the Aberdare Range. Aberdare is this range of hills, and they want to start a road going through that, which is going to affect the vegetation again, the animals that live there that depend on this ecosystem. So we're trying to raise more, make people aware of the impact of that. Also, I noticed like there's a lot of like how we expend garbage in Kenya. It's not the best. You see it everywhere. So when we try to go home, we try to get people to start to try and collect this garbage and try to put it in places where it's not hazardous, first of all, to us, and whereby we can try to have them recycle a little bit more. So there are efforts regarding that, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, recycling is so critical, and also that garbage disposal. I feel like I always see these stories about uh, our garbage from the US reaching countries in Africa and Asia. And that is kind of a shame. It's a huge
It
shame.
is. It is. It
Yeah.
is. It is. Getting ships of garbage that be sent to these countries, and unfortunately, it's the treaties that I think they're not legal treaties that are signed between our leaders, with these countries. So, and we're trying to bring more voice to that, so that we can have these things, stop, because they are affecting us also in terms of also high cancer rates. These are things that we never saw in what I want to say 50 years, 40 years back. 50 years,
Yeah.
we didn't have these things. But now everywhere I look around, everybody's, having cancer of some sort, and it's so funny. It's specific type of cancers from specific areas, like one area you'll see it's gastrointestinal type of cancer. The other area, it's going to be like breast cancer or something like that, which is really strange. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really intense. Okay, so I have a few. I didn't send this ahead of time, like, some of my other questions for you, but I do have some lightning round questions for you that
Okay.
are, we're going to start with something that's sort of related to your mission, and then we're going to go into something that is not exactly. So, if you're ready, let's go.
Okay. All right.
Okay, cool. What are three things that you do to recycle? Like, what are three things that you recycle
Okay.
or
So
reuse?
definitely, yes. So I do um, canvases. I try to reuse my canvases as much as possible. That way, I'm not buying and wasting. Two, definitely stopped using certain type of art materials. I don't use resin at all because I found that was hurting the environment. So I avoid it as much as possible. So and of course, plastics, I try to use that as well, like, plastic cups, things like that. I don't throw them away, I keep reusing, you know, and,
Mhm.
and then, when it has passed this time, I actually try to send it whereby it can be used somewhere, I guess turned into something else.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So, and in Kenya, we also tend to do that. Things like tires, the artists who use tires, the material that makes the tires, they use that. Things to make slippers, shoes, things like that. So
Oh, wow. Okay,
yes.
cool. Awesome. All right. So now we're going to head away, kind of steer away from the art world for a moment and, from your mission just a little bit. I want to ask you well, first of all, what, aside from your mission and art and all of this, what are three things that you like to do? Like watching TV, and what do you watch or what do you read and things like that? Just three
Okay.
things you love.
So number one is I do play the piano. I love that. It was actually my first love. It was piano playing was my first love. Art was second, and then they went, vice versa. So I do take lessons with my son too. So I sit down, practice my songs, new melodies, things like that. The second thing I love is reading. I really try to read a lot. It's kind of hard, of course, in this day and age because we have a lot going on as a wife, mother, have a part-time job also. So I try to, any time I can have that as extra, I try to read. So I'm kind of um, reading James Baldwin right now, the Harlem, I think it's the Harlem Story or something, the Harlem Ghetto, sorry. That is what I'm currently reading. The third thing is I do like to watch, movies. So
Oh,
yeah, and
cool.
that again, when I can find time.
Okay, what was the last movie you watched?
So the last movie that I watched was what is it called? It was a horror because that's my genre. And I think it was called the Night Swim or something like that.
Yeah, okay, I
Yes,
saw
yes.
that, but I was like too scared to watch it. So,
I loved it. I loved it.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, and also, what is your astrological sign?
Cancer.
Oh my gosh, I love cancers.
Yes.
Okay, when is your birthday?
My birthday is actually on the 9th July. So
Amazing. Okay,
yeah.
everybody, find friend Grace on Instagram and be sure to remember to wish her a happy birthday on July 9th. Um,
Yes, please.
Grace, this is so good. It's been amazing to have you here. And I want to ask you, where can we keep in touch with you? What's your website, Instagram, and, you know, yeah, how can we give you our email? How can we buy your work? Tell us everything.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much for that. So yes, you can find me at my website, which is gracewnguchu.com. It's basically my full names. You can sign up for my newsletters and get the newsletters that I send per month. It's also a place where you can, if you wanted to purchase my artwork, you can do that. I'm also on the Instagram at Grace W. Nguchu. And Facebook. You can also find me on Facebook. Yes, that is correct.
Yay! Grace, thank you so much. This was so incredible to have you on here. I feel like I could ask you a lot more questions. Um, so thank you, thank you, thank you. And a big shout out to Grace for being part of Radiant Voices, which is a group exhibition that's currently online on view through October 10th. And it has been organized by Visionary Art Collective, and I am one of the co-curators. And it was such a pleasure to see Grace's submission. And I was like, oh, yay. So Grace, it has been an incredible pleasure to have you on here. Thank you so, so much. And I hope to see you soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Marina. It was such an honor to be on this podcast. I really appreciate everything.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you. Thank
thank
you.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you so much for listening. Support your community by sharing this podcast, leaving a review, and follow The Artist Advisory on Instagram at @the_artist_advisory, and visit us online at www.theartistadvisory.com.